So as a dad, it's been my responsibility to make sure my kids learn important life skills from me. For example, I've taught them to be on high alert whenever they're around cars, to say thank you whenever someone does something nice for them, and if I think about it, I probably achieved that using a combination of classical and operant conditioning. But there are also many things that they do that I haven't intentionally taught them. Just the other day, I heard my 5-year-old son saying, "What the?" And just as I was about to ask where he learned that from, I realized I knew the answer. Me. Psychologists call this observational learning, which of course is when a person learns by watching the behavior demonstrated by someone else. Social learning theory describes this, the way in which people acquire certain behaviors by watching and learning from role models. And when the observer finally imitates the learned behavior, this is called modeling. In the 1960s, Albert Bandura and his colleagues, Dory and Sheila Ross, conducted a series of experiments in Stanford University that changed the field of research in learning and aggression. They involved a large 1.5 meter tall inflatable toy called a Bobo doll that would spring back up whenever it was pushed. In one experiment, children were shown a video of adults acting aggressively towards the Bobo doll, hitting and throwing it. The children were then placed in a room alone with the Bobo doll, and as you might predict, they too started to behave aggressively towards the Bobo dolls, just as they observed. This led Bandura to suggest that learning didn't just happen through operant or classical conditioning, but also through direct observation. In 2009, an organization called Drinkwise launched a campaign with the goal to bring about a safer drinking culture in Australia. They obviously understood the power of modeling and observational learning, because this was one of their TV ads.
Hey, how'd you blokes finish up the other night?
Right.
It's huge. Michael, go and get your old man a beer, would you?
Michael, are those snacks ready yet?
Wait a minute, love. How'd you blokes finish up after the other night, eh? Go get your old man another beer, would you?
Kids form their attitude to alcohol long before they ever have a drink themselves, from their most important role model, you.
So there's clearly no doubt that people learn through observation, but how exactly does that happen? Psychologists believe that it's a 5-stage process. Firstly, attention must be paid to the model's behavior. For example, when you're on your L's, you might concentrate on watching your parent drive. Of course, the more a learner looks up to a model, the more attention is paid as well. Secondly, the learned behavior must be stored as a mental representation in the observer's memory, so it can be utilized at a later time. The third stage is more a requirement in that the learner must have the necessary mental and physical ability to perform the behavior. Similarly, fourthly, the learner must also want to imitate the learned behavior, perhaps because they want to be like the model. And finally, when there is a prospect of a positive result for imitating the behavior, it's likely that the learner will do so. The reward may come from the model, such as a parent praising a child for imitating their behavior, from a third person, a parent praising the child for imitating another child's behavior, or simply from personal satisfaction. But there's one last way you learn by observing, and it's when you notice whether someone else's behavior leads to something good or bad. For example, one way primary school teachers often improve class behavior is to praise the actions of one student who's doing the right thing. The other students learn that that behavior leads to a good outcome and will imitate. Similarly, if I get a student in trouble for misbehavior, it's a perfect example to everyone else who's watching that that behavior leads to a bad outcome, so they shouldn't do it. This type of learning is called vicarious learning or vicarious conditioning, from the Latin vicarious meaning substitute. So positive vicarious reinforcement is when an individual sees someone else being rewarded for a behavior and then decides to act in the same way. And of course, negative vicarious reinforcement is the opposite, when an individual sees someone else being punished for a behavior and so discontinues that behavior themselves. In closing, now that you know about observational learning, I want to leave you with some questions to reflect on. Who do you think you are wanting to be like, intentionally or unintentionally? Have you picked good models for your life? And on the flip side, who are you modeling to? Whose lives might you be influencing right now? And are you going to make that influence negative or positive? And with that, our unit on learning comes to a close. But of course, learning itself will never stop. See you next time.